America's pastime is, was, and always will be shooting.
Hello everyone, Finn and Flask here. So today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm sure most of you, like me, are a fan of the Meateater and the Meateater podcast. Well, they did a new book called The American Long Hunter between 1761 and 1775. And on one of their podcasts, one of the more recent ones, was episode 512 about hog hunting in Texas. And they put chapter 7 in for you to listen to. The book is only an audio book. It's not actually available for reading. And I think it's a pretty interesting thing because that chapter 7 is about the equipment. And I'm pretty sure most people here that are interested in muzzleloading are really interested in the equipment like I am. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what they talked about and give some of my impressions on it. Before we get into the meat of the video, if you wish to support the channel, you should check out my eBay store where I sell muzzleloading accessories. It'll be linked in the description. The first thing they talk about is the rifle, which of course is the thing that's most interesting to most muzzleloaders. And they call it the Kentucky rifle and the Kentucky long rifle. Although they do mention it being the Pennsylvania rifle as well, but it's kind of semantics here, but it's more like the American long rifle. And they talk about the distinguishing characteristics of an American long rifle, which is a longer barrel than the Jaeger and a smaller diameter. They do mention the Jaeger coming from Europe and how the Germans settled in Pennsylvania and started making these things, and how Jaegers are different than, the American long rifle. They talk about the flintlock mechanism and stuff like that, and they say it replaced, earlier mechanism, stuff like that, but they don't even mention any of the other mechanisms like matchlock, dog lock, wheel lock and stuff like that, which would have been pretty interesting to talk about how much of an improvement it would be over, the older mechanisms. But they just kind of mention it in passing, which would have been, I would have liked it a little more if they went into that kind of stuff. In this, they go in depth on the sizing of the bores. They talk about how they used basically gauge to measure the size of the balls that you would be using. I thought that was pretty interesting because I didn't know that they actually did that back at the time. I thought they actually used the modern system. And maybe I'm right and they're wrong, but like the 20 gauge, 20 balls to a pound kind of thing. But it does seem to make sense, because why would you actually measure the thing? You'd have to figure that out. And they also talk about casting, how they would go into the field and have to cast their own balls and stuff like that, which was pretty interesting for people to hear, I think. They didn't really get into any of the ancillary stuff. They mentioned powder horns just kind of in passing. They talked a little bit about making your own, but that they really didn't do that. They talked about belt axes, tomahawks, hatchets. Talked about like folding knives, regular knives, and things like the quality of the metal was much lower back then. I mean, I remember seeing things that people would like sometimes break knives in half and stuff like that if they lost a knife, so that everybody could have something. They also did mention that when they would set up a big camp, they would have a lot of tools to do blacksmithing and stuff like that, so they could make their own parts for their weapons, which was pretty cool, and that's something that you would figure they did. But they also mentioned that they could restock rifles in the field. I find that a little hard to believe because, stocking a rifle, that's quite labor intensive. So I kind of don't buy that. There are some things that I think it left lacking. They didn't talk about like the clothing they wore. They didn't talk about, a lot of different things. Like I would like to hear them talk about like buckskins, breeches, how they equip their horses and how they set up their camps and stuff like that. Although I didn't I didn't listen to the whole book, but I think it left some equipment stuff lacking. But overall, it was pretty interesting to listen to, and you should probably check it out. They give you that one chapter for free in that episode 512 of the Meateater podcast. I think it's on YouTube, but it's on Spotify as well. You should check it out. I'm probably going to end up getting the book because I would like to learn more about the actual hunts and the famous people who did it and stuff. It would be pretty cool. All right, well, thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day.